for being with us on behalf of Green REV Institute, a vegan think tank from Poland, operator and initiator of the largest advocacy coalition, Future Food for Climate, which today connects 90 civil society organizations. I'm honored to welcome you to our meeting as part of the European Vegan Summit. Today with us, we have our great speaker, great leader, great person and expert. I would like to introduce to you my guest, Dr. Krista Hiddema, philanthropist and founder, activist, academic, public speaker, feminist and consultant. She oversees grants for the Corona Foundation and vegan grants dedicated to funding activism that effectively communicates a compelling vegan diet change message to a mainstream audience. With a vision of the vegan world, the foundation aims to foster a global shift towards sustainability and compassion for animals. Thank you so much for being today with us, and thank you so much for accepting our warm invitation to have with you a fireside chat one-to-one during the European Vegan Summit 2023.
Morgan, thank you. And you and your team are doing such a wonderful job. It is so hard to organize these things, and good for you that your voice is holding out. So make sure you keep drinking some warm tea or something like that.
Actually, I have my water with me, so I should be fine. Thank you so much. So without, because we want to hear today from you, about your activities. Let me ask you very straightforward question, but very important. What do you think? How do you feel? Do you feel that as animal activists, we are winning, or maybe it's not so sure?
Oh, Morgan, thank you. That is an important way to start. So thank you. And I think before I answer that question, I just wanted to keep forward in our minds something that was discussed in the opening plenary, and something that I talked about in the brief period that I had the opportunity to add to that open plenary. But there were three words that really jumped out at me. One of them was kindness, one of them was big change, and one of them was that animal welfare is not enough. And those three words, I couldn't have written them better myself, and they really underpin everything that we're doing. And in particular, when we do answer that question, Morgan, about, are we winning or are we not winning? I think that it's important that we are realistic, that we are honest, and that we take the time to really reflect on the work that we're doing. Because if we look at the statistics, and I tend to rely on the statistics from Our World in Data, which I find to be a very, very good source, what we see is if we compare 2019, or rather 2061, I don't know where that came from. No, I did it wrong again. 1961, if we compare 1961 with 2020, which is their most updated data, we see that per capita meat consumption has gone from 22.93 kilograms to over 42 kilograms per capita, which means, of course, per person. We know that egg consumption has gone from 4.5 kilograms to over 10. We know that milk consumption, while there was a brief dip in about 2010, it has still gone from 75 kilograms to over 70 kilograms. So it's still not going down significantly. And we also know that for our animal friends that live in the water, we have literally quadrupled the number of animals that we eat over the last 50 years. So I don't think, Morgan, that we are winning. We also saw a recent poll that came out from the Gallup poll. It was a North American poll, but it showed that the number of vegans just in North America was only about 1%. And I think that we need to really look at what we're doing, think deeply about what has been working, and think as well about the need for us to be brave and to engage in big, brave change for animals.
Thank you so much for this reply. I think even though you have mentioned that unfortunately we are not winning, do you think that there are some strategies? And if yes, there are some strategies, what are the best strategies for the future in animal rights activism?
Morgan, thank you. You know, whenever we talk about any social justice movement, whether it was the suffragist movement or the LGBTQ plus movement, it's important that we take the time to learn what they learned. In many ways, our movement is not identical because the animals don't speak Polish. The animals don't speak Japanese or Mandarin or English. They do speak, but they can't speak to us in the same way as other marginalized groups could speak. But we can still learn a lot from other social justice movements. And I believe that it is important that every single one of us in this movement as individuals spends a little time learning from other movements. And when we look at social movement ecology more broadly, we see that there are three really important elements to it. The first is personal transformation, the importance of one-on-one changes, one person with another person. I had an interesting discussion with a lady in a boutique the other day about a dress I was buying, and because it had a little bit of mohair in it, I wouldn't buy it. And she couldn't understand that. So I took the time to have a really gentle and meaningful conversation. So everything we do on personal transformations is really important. The second is building alternatives. And we talked about that in our keynote. We need to provide alternatives for individuals, whether that is plant cheeses and plant milks, whatever that might be. And then that third foundational element of social change is changing dominant institutions. That might be government, educational systems. And it's incumbent on us to understand that all three of these things are very important. One of the social theorists that I personally, the theory that I personally subscribe to is Bill Moyer, who wrote the book, Doing Democracy. And I'll just hold up the book so others can see it. It looks like this, Doing Democracy. It's actually not that bad of a read, but I think it's important that every one of us in this movement spends a little bit of time understanding social justice movements. One of the things I really like, Morgan, about what Bill Moyer writes about is he writes about the importance of four really different types of activism. He talks about what he calls the citizen, which is this ordinary citizen that engages in activism. He talks about the rebel, those that are more visible. Those are the folks out there doing DXE and open rescue and save vigils and those folks. Then he talks about what he calls the change agents and those that are focused on educating the public. And lastly, he talks about the reformer, those interested in political type work and lobbying. And what I love about his writings and his theories are that he discusses that all forms of activism are equally important. They are interconnected. One is not more valuable than another. And I think there is something in our movement that I see sometimes about one type of activism being seen as more valuable than another. One type of activism as being seen to be just unnecessary or even detrimental. And it's important that We learn from other social justice movements. We embrace the importance that all the work we're all doing is critical, and that we learn that we must help one another. We must support one another. There may be certain kinds of activism that I might do or not do, but I still know it's important. And fundamentally, if we embrace some knowledge of social justice movements, it will reduce significantly the infighting that we do see. It will increase the synergies among us. It will truly put us in a position where we are putting the animals first. We are helping them, because when there is that infighting, and when we see the lack of respect for different types of activism, what we're doing is we're just hurting the animals.
What really resonates with me is that you already mentioned it in the opening plenary. You said that it is fundamental, and we are personally responsible to learn more about social justice theory.
Yes.
So if our entire movement comes down to people, what does that mean?
Mm-hmm. You know, when I mentioned earlier that only about 1% of the population of North Americans are vegan, I don't know those statistics in other countries, but I would certainly imagine that it's pretty low elsewhere as well. And I think sometimes we forget how few of us there are. So not only are there maybe 1% of vegans in the world, you even have to make that number smaller when you take out the people who are past working days. They've retired maybe. You take out the people that are too young to work. Then you take out all the vegans who don't work in the movement. So the reality is there are very few of us. I'm sure that I know some of the folks out in the audience, and I can tell you that after my opening plenary, I got a couple of texts from a girlfriend in the UK and another girlfriend in the US who said, I saw you. We kind of all know each other, right? And because there's so few of us, we need to take care of each other. You know, when I did my doctoral research, I had the opportunity to work with 33 amazing women. And of all the quotes, and it was qualitative research, so I spent many, many hours with each person. And my favorite quote from all the quotes that I had was one woman said to me, and this is her quote, I want to give her credit. I won't give her name because everybody was anonymous, but she said to me, this is her, I think all of my fellow animal rights activists and my coworkers, I think of them as heroes that are saving animals. I feel like we're the coolest people ever, and I'm so happy to be one of us. That's what she said. And when she said that, it touched my heart so deeply, because we are all pretty darn cool. We do the best work and the hardest work. And we know as well, there's so few of us. And on top of that, we do see some pretty high turnover in certain places. And that turnover is something that we really need to look at closely, because there isn't this, well, for two reasons. Number one, because it's the right thing to do. And number two, because there aren't millions of us that want to be full-time animal rights activists. We are a small group. So if we are to do this important social justice work, and if we are to do the best work for animals, we have to take care of each other. Our organizations need to take care of us. Whether we are an employee at the organization, maybe we're a volunteer. We are equally important. Our volunteers and our employees are of equal importance. And it is incumbent on our organizations to take care of us, because high turnover is exceedingly expensive. We lose money in recruiting and training. We lose money in lost productivity and lost knowledge. We lose money in just paying recruiting costs. We lose money in donor relations when certain people leave who might have been fundraisers. We lose money sometimes in legal costs when somebody leaves and if there are legal complications. We lose institutionalized memory. We lose the deep impact of our programmatic work. And I see some really high burnout rates in our movement. And I think that we truly need to think more deeply about burnout, about what it means. And we need to truly move our minds to a place where taking care of each other and our organizations taking care of us becomes the priority. It is for all leaders in this movement, taking care of your people simply must be your priority. You know, I'll digress just for a moment and share with you that in my past life, I was the vice president of human resources for an international software company called SAP. It was based out of Germany. We had, today actually, SAP has over 100,000 employees in 157 countries, and their revenues are in the tens of billions of dollars. When I was their head of HR, the most important thing I did, and what I did all day, every day, was look at ways to reduce burnout and increase employee engagement and ensure that we were doing everything we could to take care of our people. And I was doing that for an organization where people were paid tons of money. And I don't think anyone in our movement is paid tons and tons of money. I might be wrong, but I kind of don't think so. So it's even more reason. So not only are there not tons of us, but we don't make tons of money. So we need to have our leaders take care of us. And we are the ones that are the cool ones doing the important work for animals. And there simply must be a way that we focus on people first. I don't know, that was kind of a long answer, Morgan. Sorry about that.
No, I absolutely love the way how you described us, that I definitely think that we're indeed the coolest people ever. We do the best and of course the hardest work, but it's so much needed. But you have already touched upon the topic of taking care of each other, which is very important. And I thank you very much for saying that in such a clear way. So I wanted to ask you about burnout and how's your definition of burnout?
Yeah. You know, I've had the opportunity to write a lot about burnout in my own academic work. I've written blogs on it. I ended up having the opportunity as well to write a blog for Philanthropists about burnout. So you can go to Philanthropists and read a bit more about it. And you know, it's what's interesting is that one of the other things that Bill Moyer talks about in his theory of social justice movement, and again, I'm referring to this book, is Bill Moyer has 8 stages of development that social justice movements go through. And the one stage that he refers to as stage 5, he calls it perception of failure. And one of the things he talks about is in order to get from stage 5, which is where I think we're at in this movement, and actually stage 5 is a really good place to be. And the reason it's a good place to be is stage 6, the next stage, is majority public opinion. So that's the stage where the majority of the public is on side with us. But Bill Moyer talks about the fact that the main way to get from stage 5 to stage 6 is for organizations to reduce burnout. He talks about the fact that in stage 5, Those power holders that are against us use burnout to their advantage. And we must understand that those power holders, those meat industry that, Jane Velez Mitchell talked about this morning, those are the people that are using burnout to hurt us, to hurt the animals. And we need to focus on ensuring that it is not happening in our movement, or at least reduce it. From a purely academic perspective, there are some very formal academic definitions of burnout. The first person to really bring burnout to the mainstream was a woman by the name of Christina Maslach, and that was in and about the late 1970s. And she coined the tool called the Maslach Burnout Inventory. You can find it online. And she really defined burnout in particular as including when employees are overwhelmingly exhausted, when they have become cynical, and when they feel like they're lacking accomplishment. And these are ways that as leaders in our movement, we can keep those things forefront, and we can look at ways that we can mitigate that. One of the other things that we talk about in academia is there are countless research studies in the not-for-profit sector on burnout. I know of, and I have personally read and summarized over 50 studies just in the NGO across the world on burnout. There were 2 that were specific to our actual movement. One of them was called Where the Boys Aren't, and the other one was called Nobody's Paying Me to Cry. The first one was an Emily Gardier study, and the second one was a Gorski study. And in both of those cases, they found various issues similar, things like infighting, things like a martyrdom culture. I don't know if anyone has ever said this to you, Morgan, or to any of our listeners, but if you've ever had a leader say to you, you can't take the day off because animals don't get a day off, they're still in a factory farm, right? That kind of martyrdom culture is not helping us. Remember how cool we are? We're also allowed to have some fun. And that is one of many things that I try to talk to leaders about, is that really painful martyrdom culture. We need to focus very specifically on what we're doing to ensure engagement. So the opposite of burnout is engagement. And you can even Google the burnout engagement. What's the word? It'll come to me in a moment. But engagement is the opposite of burnout. It's the continuum. I knew it would come to me. The engagement burnout continuum. And some of the things I like to share with leaders is the importance of focusing on diversity, about dismantling power dynamics, accepting multiple truths. We can work hard and love animals, and we can take a vacation. And challenging this group think. And that goes back to that very first question you asked me, Morgan. We need to challenge what we as activists have been doing these last couple of decades, because something's not quite right. Meat consumption is going up. And we need to look really hard at what we've been doing and really think about and embrace open internal dialogue where there's no repercussions if we disagree. We have to have honest, deep dialogue about what's working and what's not working.
Thank you so much. I think what I will definitely remember from our conversation today is that the opposite of burnout is engagement. And also,
Yes.
please let me repeat those two important studies for our viewers that you have mentioned. The first one is Where the Boys Aren't, and the second one is Nobody's Paying Me to Cry. I would definitely take a look at them tomorrow in the morning. But following this extremely important topic, I wanted to ask you maybe a little bit more complex question. Who is actually responsible for mitigating burnout?
Yes, that's a really big question. I guess I could do this, Morgan, is I could give you a super short answer, and then I'll expand on it a little bit. The really short answer is that the ultimate responsibility is our boards of directors and our advisory boards. I see so often in our movement that our boards of directors are just seen as a rubber stamp, that they're not seen as being deeply engaged themselves. I talk to a lot of board members about their role on a board, and I must share with you that very, very often they don't understand their legal responsibilities, and they also often don't understand their moral and ethical obligations. Nonprofit boards in the vast majority of countries. Now, I want to be clear that this is not every single country in the world, but in the vast majority of countries, boards of directors are the legal head of the organization. They are responsible for the financial health of the organization. They are responsible for fundraising. They are responsible for legal compliance. They are responsible for overseeing the work of the executive director. They are responsible for setting the ED's salary and doing their performance reviews. They are responsible for the strategic plan of the organization, and they are responsible for the care of the people within the organization. It is the job of the board. It is truly unfortunate that often board members don't understand the depth and the significance of their role. And I would challenge everyone that's listening here today that is on a board, and gosh, even if you're not on a board, if you've ever thought about being on a board, go and understand your obligations. They are slightly different country to country. So do look at it within your country, but Google it. I can almost guarantee that there will be legislation about your role as a board member, and there will certainly be lots of different board governance models. In many cases, people will join boards because they think it might be prestigious. They might want to put it on their resume. They might want to talk about it at a party. So in many cases, they see the role as being somewhat ceremonial, or even somewhat just sort of fun on the side. But it is a very serious role. When I was the president of the board for Happily Ever Esther, which is home of Esther the Wonder Pig, I was the board president for 6 years, the first 6 years. I can tell you that I easily spent about 20 hours a week doing my job, overseeing the financials. I did everything from write their employee handbook to writing job descriptions. I put in place a benefit plan for the employees, even though there was a handful. I would meet with the employees regularly. I would have opportunities where I would walk around the farm so people could talk to me. I would regularly meet with volunteers. My job was to make sure that the people were excited and happy about their work. I took that role very, very seriously. And I would encourage everybody to look at your role if you're a board member, and to not look at it as a rubber stamp and something fun for a cocktail party, but look at the serious nature of that role, and look at the fact that the care of your people are your job as board members. Now, certainly, there's other obligations that leaders and managers have, but it must start with the board. And the board can then provide the additional information. They can encourage the leaders to understand. They can set the example for the leaders to be as focused on employee engagement, Morgan, and they can really, truly take the time and the money to take care of your people. We sometimes only think of our programmatic work, and we're really worried about overhead, and we think, oh no. I can tell you, as a funder, when I see overhead really, really, really low, I actually worry about that. It tells me that they may not be taking care of their people. There should be benefit programs. There should be recognition programs. There should be leadership development. All these things should be happening. And it really must start with the board, in my view, Morgan.
This is really important what you have said, and it brought me to the question that I was asking myself during the conversation when you were saying your reply for the question. How many NGOs has the policy on burnout, and how many NGOs has the strategy to empower and support activists? That would be very interesting to know. I'm not sure if you have any thoughts on that.
Yeah. I mean, I have to tell you, I've been in this movement a long time, and I have the opportunity to work with a lot of groups, and I can think of maybe a handful, that have real clear, a clear and deep commitment to preventing burnout and advancing engagement. And one of the reasons I really wanted to talk about that today was because it is so important. And there aren't as many as I would certainly like to see. And again, I really realize that everybody is strapped for money. I get it. But if we're not spending some money and certainly some time taking care of our people, we can't do our best. We're going to lose some of us cool people, and I guess my urgent call to all of you, every one of you, is to talk to your boards. The other interesting thing I've experienced in talking to people is a lot of times employees and volunteers don't even know who their board members are. Or they might say to me, well, I could never call them. And I'm like, your board works for you. If you have a question, you call them, I remember at Happily Ever Esther, we had a Facebook page only for our employees and volunteers. And I would probably every few weeks, I would repost the board roles and responsibilities. I had it all laid out so that if anyone had a question about anything, they knew who to call and who to ask. Know your board. Ask them what they're doing. Ask for their roles and responsibilities. Get to know them. Ask them what the strategy is of the organization and what their priorities are. Talk to your board members. They should want to be getting to know you too. They work for you.
Thank you very much. I think I'm a lucky one because I know exactly who's a board member. I'm also a board member of Green REV Institute.
I didn't know that, Morgan. Amazing.
So, but thank you very much. I want to ask another question because I heard you use the word care when you were talking about board. That's not a word we hear a lot when we talk about governance. It is a word, however, that we tend to use more as women and within feminist circles. And it's no secret that although women make up most of the global animal advocacy movement, as you noted, both professionally and voluntarily, it is still men who dominate the boards and other managing positions. I know that you've done research on women's professional experience in the animal rights movement. So I wanted to ask, do you have any theory on why our progressive movement, one which is in its essence a social justice movement, still hasn't fully solved this internal problem? You sometimes talk about unearned power and the privilege which comes from wealth. Would you say that the privilege which comes from gender is also unearned and privileging in our movement, or do you see sufficient progress here? Has your research on women working animal advocacy shown something underneath the surface, which is, in your opinion, requires any attention?
Yeah, that's a lot of big questions there, Morgan. Most of the research I've read does show that women make up approximately 77% of our movement. So we are the vast majority of the cool people, Morgan, of these amazing cool people doing this cool work. It is mostly women. That is absolutely true. And I should be clear if I wasn't already, I think you said it, but I am an ecofeminist. It is sort of how I see the world. It's how I come to understand the world, is through the lens of ecofeminism. And in our movement, we are a microcosm of the world at large. So while women definitely are doing the majority of the work, there are not as many women leaders as there absolutely need to be. And unearned privilege is something I do talk about quite a bit, Morgan, and it applies to any privileged group. It applies based on wealth, based on gender, based on color. It applies based on sexuality. We in our movement talk a lot about being more progressive, but in some ways we're not. In some ways we are just a microcosm of the movement. I think that something that boards in particular can also do is ensure that they are providing opportunities for all disadvantaged members of their organizations. I think as conference leaders, you folks are and can be ensuring that there are speaking slots for women, for people of color, for members of the LGBTQ community. Every one of us has a responsibility. Not only do we have a responsibility to understand social justice movements, but we have a responsibility to literally be activists in every part of our lives, including in how we work with others in our movement. And boards, again, should be looking at their own makeup. Is the board all men? Is the board all white people? The boards themselves, I actually wrote a blog on board diversity, and I do believe that this form of diversity, again, starts with our boards. So a question that all boards should be asking themselves is, are we diverse? And if we're not, why aren't we? Have we tried to diversify and we haven't been able to? Or have we just not tried at all? And there are tools that I have developed that assist boards through that process. But, the other component that comes often with this sort of fairly male-dominated leadership is that we see care as being more feminist, right? Care and kindness. I see a lot in our movement where if I think about people who do, for instance, hands-on care for farm animal sanctuaries, they tend to more be women. And that role is a role that is often one of the lower paid roles in our movement. And that is a role that is often not seen as important as being a member of the Open Wing Alliance. But the reality is care-based work in our movement, like in society at large, is in some ways seen as lesser. You know, the irony for me, particularly as an ecofeminist, is that we're asking the world to care about farmed animals. We're asking the world to care about the earth. We're asking the world to care about these things, but we're not caring about them. And it's interesting, again, in that open plenary with Philip Morgan, he talked about the most important thing is kindness, and kindness and care are interconnected. And part of this kindness and care is recognizing that we're not better than animals. So as an ecofeminist, we talk about value dualisms. Man, woman, black, white. We talk about these, and we as ecofeminists, we resist value dualisms. We resist the idea that value is only seen through rationality and through numbers. We see value as care and kindness. We see value through connectivity and through respect for others. We see value in our genuine desire for care and ensuring that others feel cared for. So I would definitely like to see a greater emphasis in our movement to be placed on care and the value of care. I mean, it is fundamental, and I do believe that that starts, again, with the boards showing us that example, but we too can show that example to each other.
Thank you very much. I have to ask you this question, because as a board member, the youngest one, because this is exactly the strategy of Green REV Institute, actually to empower youth and LGBTQI plus activists. I need to ask, how can we leave our bubbles and make the diversity the part of our strategy and strength as well?
Yep. Yes. And Morgan, thank you. And thank you for the work you are doing at Green REV and being a leader and being an example for other young women. Thank you. One of the things that I developed through my doctoral work was a brand new model. I call it the care-based model of nonprofit governance. I cannot tell you how many hours I spent researching governance models for our sector, for the entire NGO sector. And I literally could not find one that I thought was appropriate for us. So I have developed my own. And I've designed it specifically for our movement. And within that design, I created almost a roadmap for implementation so that folks like you ultimately could do it yourselves. And it includes the legal requirements for boards with the moral, with the need to care. Hence, I call it the care-based model of nonprofit board governance. The model I created is also very contextual. And one of the things as ecofeminists is we reject anything that is not contextual. And the context that I created within this model is based on things like the stage that the board is at. Are they in their infancy, or are they a more mature organization? I consider the number of years the group has been in operation. I look at the geographic scope. I look at the revenue, because again, the board in an organization that has $10 million revenue is very different than $500,000 or 100,000 even. So I apply that context. I also have various assessment factors, and those include valuing our employees, valuing intersectional activism, valuing our volunteers, being active in our communities. So I have a system for boards to be able to engage in a self-assessment first so they know. And then, of course, the entire model is based on the mission and vision of the organization, which too is contextual. I'm hoping to roll this out, Morgan, in the new year. And if there are any groups out there, including you, if you want to be my sort of trial for this new model, let me know. I'm excited to be rolling it out. I'm building out all the tools for it. And it does exactly what you're suggesting, Morgan, which is valuing these important elements of our work and ensuring that they are based on a model of care.
Thank you very much, and definitely we're more than interested to get to know
Cool.
your work, more about your work. I think after today's conversation, we'll have the whole list of resources that I should definitely check out to learn more, to grow more, of course, and to be a better person for my team and the NGO for a better future for everyone. I wanted to ask you a very special question for me, because we're talking a lot about what is happening now, what are the obstacles, what are the problems, how to solve them. But I wanted to ask you about future. I wanted to ask you, if you were to predict the future, where would you say we would be in about a year? And in about 10 years, will we advance animal rights, or will there be a backlash? Elections and campaigns, of course, are coming, and in the EU and around countries like in Poland, and we see that the world has recently been showing a sad direction for agriculture. So the production of food is largely disconnected from protecting the climate in this discussion. One can observe a business as usual approach where the search is for ways to work around difficult circumstances like the climate crisis or worse, and just find other ways to produce and exploit. At the same time, even those who care, like many climate protection activists, largely ignore factory farming and focus their attention mainly on fossil fuels and transport. I wanted to ask if you see a way out. Are you at a optimistic side of the conversation, or maybe not so much optimistic?
You know, Morgan, I mean, fundamentally, I'm very optimistic. I'm optimistic if we do a few things, if we truly prioritize caring for people in our movement, if we truly understand and take the time to understand social justice movements. I will say that what you noted about environmental organizations talking about fossil fuels and less about food, it baffles me to no end, Morgan. It baffles me. Having said that, there's a couple things that keep me very excited, and it's something that I think we should be really focused on. In the past, animal activists have often been seen as, oh, they're so silly. Why would anybody love a chicken? Why would anybody love a pig? You know, I have a pig who's one of my best friends, but I get that people say that. But some very interesting things are happening globally, of course, which really are providing us with monumental opportunities. I mean, number one, the United Nations, they have their One Health model, where they have equally noted that there is a trifecta of important work: animal health, individual health, and environmental health. The UN is saying that in their One Health model. We have seen things like the 7 anthropogenic factors to prevent the next pandemic. That was a report I read some time ago. And of those 7 factors, every one of them were either directly or indirectly related to animal agriculture. I mean, there are things happening at a global level that are giving us the opportunity to elevate our place globally as NGOs. These are things that we didn't have when I started as an activist. We see them now. We must hold on to them. We must ensure that the work we're doing is not only are we showing the help to animals, but we're showing that how it helps the environment and how it helps health. It's giving us that opportunity to truly raise our game and sit at the table. Some people call it sitting at the table. It's a figure of speech to suggest that you're at the most important table. So we have this opportunity and we need to embrace it. The time is now. And in order to do that, we have to understand social justice theory. We have to have deep respect for all forms of activism, not one being more important than the other. We need to have a more balanced ecosystem of programmatic work and activism. We need to respect each other's forms of activism, and we need to take care of each other.
We have one question from the audience.
Please.
It's really important. I think I'm eager to know the answer for this question. We are of course not perfect as human animals, as humans. How we can face and manage our mistakes in our work as leaders of organizations? How to be a people who care and people who at the same time make mistakes and learn.
Look, I make mistakes all the time, all the time. And, you know, I had a Zoom call with one of my team members before this, and we were going through something, and I was like, oh, did I ever do a bad job of that? Like, I think one of the really easy things is to just be human, be honest, be vulnerable. And when you've made a mistake, own it and say it. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're the president of the board or an executive director or what you are. We're all human and we all make mistakes, and owning those mistakes are really important. I think something else that I truly believe, again, coming at this from an eco-feminist framework, is as eco-feminists, we try to at least reduce hierarchy as much as is possible and reasonable. There are certain hierarchical matters that as leaders, we can't eliminate because they are ingratiated in law in some way. It is our legal obligation to have certain duties, but we can certainly reduce the level of hierarchy, and we can include all members of our organization in our in our decision making. We can solicit varying opinions, and as leaders, we can set the example. Set the example and truly yourselves learn what it means to be a social justice activist. Embrace this other forms of activism. Don't denigrate them. Like, really set the example for how you are in the world. And a big part of that is seeking to reduce hierarchy as much as possible. Demonstrating. I'll tell you one quick thing. I don't know. Do we have one more minute left or not?
Yes, yes. Don't worry.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
I wasn't sure. I remember in a previous life, I used to do executive coaching in my previous for-profit life. And one of the questions I would always ask people I was working with is I would always ask a sort of a silly question, but I would say something like, okay, if you had $100 to buy a gift for each one of your employees, what would you buy them? And I always learned a lot from that answer, because the leader who says, oh, well, I just give them each $100 gift certificate for Amazon, right? There was no Amazon when I was doing this executive coaching work because I'm really old, but I'll pretend it was Amazon. And I would always think the leader who says that doesn't know their people. The leader who would come back to me and say, oh, I know what I would get Morgan. She loves books, and she particularly loves these type of books. I would buy her that. Oh, I know Julia so well. I know what she would love. Like, her favorite popcorn is da 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 da. I'd buy her a case of this popcorn. Like, that's the difference for me. And it was always the starting point for me. So I would go in and do executive coaching, first sit and just have a chat with the individual, the leader. That's the first question I always ask them. And they always thought it was a dumb question. They always thought, well, that's a kind of a silly question. What does that have to do with my business? And because I was in the for-profit sector, but I learned a lot about who they were as leaders. So aspire to be the leader that knows exactly what you would do with $100 per person. Know your people. Sorry, Morgan.
It would definitely stay in my mind. I'll remember this, I think, forever, if not longer. Yeah. We have another question from the audience.
Thank you.
How to talk about food and climate solidarity with different groups?
How to talk about food and solidarity. There was an email I literally just got very recently. It was on a mass email that I received. I'm trying to, if you're seeing me look to the one side, that's what I'm looking at right now. I'm trying to look for it because here it is. It came, David Meyer, who runs Food System Innovations, sent this out, and it's a phenomenal research tool that Dr. Galina Hale wrote on the importance of how to talk about food. And what I can do, can I put this in the chat? Am I able to do that?
Yes. We can definitely share with the viewers.
Okay, I just put that in the chat because I would honestly share with all of you that I am not an expert in climate matters. It's not my area of expertise. I definitely am very knowledgeable about farmed animal lives, but environment is not my specialty. But this article, I literally came out on September 12th, a couple of days ago. It was so well done. And I think it would be a phenomenal tool to assist anyone in having conversations about the environment and really combining that with your conversations about animals. It's so streamlined. It's so beautiful, right? We can, and I think it's important that we know our audience. So if we're talking about people who really only care about the environment, then just focus on the environment. If we're talking about people who have a more wholesome view of the world, then also talk about animals. Talk about wild animals and the health of wild animals. Talk about human health. Talk about issues related to food deserts and food insecurity. You know, I think it was actually Philip this morning, Morgan, remind me if I'm wrong, but one of the speakers, it may have been the lady who read the letter for the politician, Dr. Sylvia Spurnick, who couldn't come.
Yeah, Dr. Sylvia Spurnick, it was Barbara Volk.
Barbara, right. She did a wonderful job. And she talked about, one of my dogs is just joining us right now. Sorry about that. She talked about just the environmental impact. And she had some really great talking points in her letter that Barbara wrote out. So maybe that's something that you and the Green REV team could share for folks. But she talked about having courage, and she talked about the fact that animal welfare was not enough, because welfare does not, of course, change environmental conditions. It doesn't impact wildlife. You know, it doesn't make wildlife, it doesn't provide better conditions for wildlife. It doesn't improve matters related to the environment. But, understand these things and really look at some great, I keep a tremendous, in my bookmarks, really great sites that I can refer to if I ever need to do a quick review of something before I talk to somebody. So having that in your back pocket is a great idea too.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I will definitely share the resources with the
Okay.
viewers. We have more question coming up. There's a question from one person who is asking, what's your source of motivation? What keeps you going? Where to look for motivation as an activist?
Oh boy, is that ever a hard one? I think generally I'm a decently optimistic person. And I think that whenever like one of my dogs just joined us, Daisy, and I have to tell you, the joy that I get from we have several dogs and several cats, and we have a house full of rescued people, furry people. I really get my motivation from them. I wish I had a more eloquent answer to that, but I truly get my motivation from them every single day. Daisy sleeps between my husband and I every single night. She has to be parallel between us every night. She's a Great Dane, weighs in at about 130 pounds. So, she's very present in the bed. But I tell you, every morning I wake up with her and she is on my shoulder, this shoulder, and I look at her, and almost every morning I'll say to her, okay, girl, let's go. We got to go help some more animals. I wish I had a better answer, but it really is, the people, the furry people in my life that inspire me every single day.
Thank you so much. And I think everyone agrees that we already love Daisy. Just thank you.
He's pretty great.
We have also a question from Green REV Institute member board. Great. How can we implement the really effective succession in organization? Because we need more and more new generations to be empowered, to be non-human animals advocates, to be human rights advocates. How to do it effectively?
Yes, absolutely. Succession planning, both informally and formally. So succession planning, as an organizational development expert, I look at it very often in a very formal way, which is, who are you training to replace your executive director? Who are you, because every key position, and now all positions are critical, but certain key positions are important that you know exactly who their successor is if they were to go, or you're beginning the process of training that person. So formal succession planning for key positions, critical. Formal succession planning for additional board members is also very important. I think that particularly for boards, one of the roles of the board members is to always be out and about networking, to always be looking for people that go into that board pipeline. So board recruitment is an area that I've written about and talk about quite extensively. In a more informal way, one of the ways that we can constantly be recruiting is from our volunteers. Volunteers, if we treat them well and kindly and with care, what a wonderful way to constantly be getting new employees for our organization. So what are you doing to foster volunteer engagement within your organization? If you don't have volunteers, I would challenge you to find a way to get a key important role for your volunteers. There are ways that, there are different kinds of volunteers, folks that are wanting to do hands-on work and leafleting, and at farms, folks that want to muck stalls, and then there are social media volunteers, and then there are so many critical ways to be able to learn more and build up that pipeline through volunteer engagement. And I would argue that as much time and energy as is spent taking care of your employees should be spent fostering a volunteer network. That's your succession plan.
I have to share with you that back in 2021, I was actually starting as a volunteer at Green REV Institute.
Morgan, and now you're on the board of directors. I mean, we couldn't have set that up better if we had planned it in advance. You're volunteers. People want to help. Like, oh my goodness gracious. You know, people can give money and different people can give different amounts of money. But for those that can give money, they still might want to volunteer. And for those that can't give money, they may want to volunteer. Sit down and really look at ways that you can be more effective as an organization by utilizing volunteers. And it's a great way to get to know them. Morgan, they got to know you, and look at you now. I mean, yeah, volunteers.
Yes, it's amazing. It's amazing. It's truly amazing. We'll have time for one more question. I'm sorry for those questions who I can't, I don't have time to read them out, but there's one more question. How to be the person who cares if you're constantly attacked, and in case of female activists, it is a cyber violence as well.
Okay. So, wow, that is a very big question to this wonderful, brave person who asked it. Oh my goodness. First of all, I am so sorry. Nobody in this movement, nobody anywhere should ever have to be a victim of any form of bullying, whether in person or cyber. I spend a tremendous amount of time helping organizations with respect in the work processes and programs. If this is what you are experiencing as a result of your work or your volunteer work, I would strongly encourage you to talk to somebody in your organization, whether it's your executive director or a board member. You should most certainly, under no circumstances, be having to deal with that. That truly, literally breaks my heart. So nobody on this call, on this meeting, anywhere, should have to be in any way subject to any form of harassment, discrimination, bullying, ever, whether it's based on your gender, your sexuality, your age, your socioeconomic status, or for any other reason. It is, let me be the person to tell you in the clearest of terms, it is not okay. I practiced law in this area for 10 years before, of course, joining this movement. It is never okay. Ever. Every single organization should have a respectful workplace policy. They should have people within the organization that are specially trained to deal with any challenges that exist. They should have training for all of you. It is part of taking care. And if that is something you are experiencing, please, please tell somebody.
Thank you so much. I think this message was very strong and very clear. I support what you said. I think should never experience any kind of violence. It's disgraceful that still in the 21st century have to go through the same things.
I agree with you, Morgan.
We are about to finish the conversation, but I wanted to ask you if you have any last message to
you know, I just want to remind everybody how cool you are. Maybe I'm not cool because I still use the word cool because I'm well into my 50s, but I think you're all very cool. Please remember how cool you are. Thank you for being the bravest, most compassionate people in the world. You are all doing the hardest work. We all are. Be kind to yourselves too. And I know we say this all the time, but whatever that means for you. Do you love snuggling your dogs like I do? Do you walk? Do you do yoga? Do you cook great meals? Do you go to movies? Whatever you do, you're also allowed to have fun, my friends. You are allowed to have fun. The animals want you to have fun because they don't want you to burn out. We need you to stick around for years and years to come and keep being the amazing, cool activists that you are.
Thank you very much. And I can also see that there are some comments coming in regarding to your previous reply about violence.
Yes.
And I can, from my experience as an animal rights activist, I need to say, unfortunately, cyber violence comes from outside. Our government calls us ideology. So please, let's take care of each other. Let's work together, because together we're the coolest team ever.
We are the coolest.
Thank you. Yes.
Folks can reach out to me. The easiest way might be my website, and there's a contact me. So it's just drkristahidema.com. The doctor, just drkristahiddema.com. If I can help you with something.
Thank you so much for this great conversation. We've got shared the resources with the viewers. And yes, thank you on behalf of the organizer, Green REV Institute, and the largest advocacy coalition, which today connects 90 civil society organizations, Future Food for Climate. I very much invite you to join us. We are creating a movement for just transition of the food and agriculture system. Future Food for Climate. We educate, we strengthen the voice of the young people as part of the Green Advocacy Academy. We are building an expert debate as the part of the European Vegan Summit. And every day we advocate for repairing the food system for animals, people, and the planet. So I see you all tomorrow, 4 p.m. Central European Time. Krista, thank you so much for the great conversation, very insightful conversation. It will stay with me forever. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Morgan. Thank you. Bye, everybody.